to the Empowered Curiosity podcast. Today I am doing something a little bit different. I've not done this, in probably over a year now. And the thing I'm going to do today is answer questions from the community. And to do that, I've invited my dear friend, collaborator, co-coach of Business Alchemist Mentorship to join me. This is Nadine Zumot, and she's here with us.
Hello, everyone. Good to be back. Thanks for having me back. I had a chuckle on co-coach. I don't know why. It just sounded like Coco. Like Coco. So silly.
The name Coco has like pretty big significance in my life and in my family's life. Like, my parents don't speak English very well, and so I feel like every pet we've had was named Coco, because it was just like an easy name for them to pronounce.
They're all called Coco.
So I've had multiple Coco rabbits and Coco dogs and birds. So Coco has a special spot in my heart.
There you go.
Well, that was a random tangent, everyone. But
well,
that's okay.
It is a different episode. You promised, we deliver.
So, I've been in just conversation with the community on Instagram and also within our own sort of private BAM community. And I started noticing a theme around giving and receiving coming up. And these are a bit more tangible and practical when it comes to entrepreneurship, these questions. But as always, we have a tendency to link it back to spirit and, old wounds and how we have had to survive in our lives. And this relationship to giving and receiving has a big component to surviving. So I think that we're gonna have fun with these questions.
Let's have fun. Cool.
Yay! So are you ready to get in?
Yes.
Wonderful. So I'm just going to read the questions as they were asked to me.
Okay.
So the first question is, how do I differentiate between free versus paid content? How do I differentiate between free versus paid content?
So free content versus free content as in what they share on social media and their newsletters and all of that versus what they share within a private container with their clients. Yeah.
Or a public one, it can be a community or group coaching or, whatever that paywall looks like for folks.
Yeah.
There's lots of different ways to put that.
That's something that I struggled with a lot in the very beginning of my own journey. Because what's the slogan for new entrepreneurs? Value, give value, give value. You're like, what the hell does that even mean? Yeah,
absolutely. I also struggled with this a long time, and I think ultimately what it comes down to is boundaries.
I was gonna say, I knew you were gonna say boundaries, and that's for me as well. It's all about boundaries. Keep going. I'll riff off you.
Yeah, I think anything that we share in this episode is meant as advice and perhaps as this is how we've done it, but our inquiry is always, how does that feel like in your body, in your experience, rooted in your own intuition and guidance? And so, take everything that we are talking about and also layer in your own check-in process and capacity to really trust your own intuition when it comes to these things. But for me, when it comes to this difference between free versus paid content, my big sort of big swathy brushes that I'm painting with are, can we give sort of general advice and insight and wisdom that can be applicable to many, many people? Or is this individual coaching? And so when it goes into individual coaching land, I have to draw a strong boundary because people, they're welcome to ask And, but there's been a lot of requests for coaching in my DMs. And that's where I have to sort of draw the line, is as soon as it starts creeping up into, tell me about your specific circumstances, tell me about, you know, how, let's see, giving and receiving has shown up in your life specifically. That's when I have to draw a hard boundary for myself when it comes to giving free versus paid content. So that's my first piece.
For me, what it looked like in the very beginning was, you know, when I first started on my own business journey, I enrolled in many business courses that were not very trauma informed. So, well, not at all, actually. And as I was saying earlier, they were all about share value. You have to prove your value. You have to prove your value. And I did receive some advice from, you know, these programs back then, is always to put a call to action. And the call to action is like, if you have any questions, send me a DM. And it's kind of like to build that trust. And at the time, I did also receive, you know, DMs with, so I have this and this problem. What do you think? And I, at the time, felt like, oh, I need to give value. And I didn't realize that I was actually coaching for free via DMs. And it just kind of felt icky in my body. Like, I was like, oh, I don't feel right about this, but I have to give value. And I must say, like, at the time, I had a big separation between wise Nadine and business Nadine. Business Nadine was this, like, little naive girl that just listened to everything. All these, like, thousands of dollars I spent in business courses. I was like, they're right, I'm wrong. So I overrode myself. And that boundary came in later on when I was like, okay, I am not coaching for free. But then what is the difference between what I give to someone versus like in a private container versus what I'm sharing, let's say in a post or all of that? So yeah, it did come down to boundaries for me as well. And also trusting that icky feeling in my body. Because sometimes you want to give generously, right? But there's that limit that's so personal to you.
Yeah. And I think that the generosity is not something that I want to discourage in our communities. You know, we have a lot of big-hearted service-based entrepreneurs here. And so being able to like have that generosity be something that doesn't get taken advantage of is oftentimes more the case than you need to give more value. You know, a lot of our clients in BAM are people who maybe overgive. And so we need to like shore up the overgiving a little bit. And that desire, I think it's worth asking yourself, what is that desire to overextend? Where does that come from? You know, what sort of family stories were you given? What sort of cultural context did you grow up in? Particularly when it comes to women, we are expected and trained to and conditioned to be the absorbers of all the pain. And so it's so easy as you grow up in a particular family dynamic and then you live in a particular culture, and then we just take all of those conditions and apply them to our businesses. And the sort of key marker for myself was the feeling of resentment. That is the key marker for me too. Right. And for me, like, resentment feels like a stuckness. It feels like a frozenness for me. And I feel it like in my solar plexus. I can sort of like bring it up right now. And so when I feel that level of resentment in my body, it's then a question of how did I allow myself to overgive? You know, people are allowed to ask, and then it's my role to then look within and say, I am capable of giving this much, or I'm capable of saying no. And just because somebody asks, I'm not obligated to give that all away, if that makes sense. You know?
Yeah. So the resentment is, for me, and for a lot of, so I use a lot of archetypes in my work, and we use archetypes inside of the Business Alchemist mentorship as well. Resentment is my biggest symptom or the loudest symptom of when I slip into my martyr archetype.
Yes.
So when I slip into my martyr archetype, I overgive. I tend to put other people's needs before me. And the first thing that happens is like I feel resentment because what I'm giving does not feel energetically equal to what I'm receiving.
Yeah.
And this happens in general when we trace it back. In general, it happens when we want to receive so badly that we end up giving to take. You know?
Yeah.
So there's something that's missing in our lives. We feel underappreciated, or we just feel that energetic imbalance. So how do we subconsciously try to equalize it or balance it out? It's not healthy, but we all fall into this trap of like, all right, I'm just going to overgive. I'm just going to do this, give, just in hopes of receiving.
Yes. Yes. And how often have we experienced that as, I mean, I should just speak for myself. Like, there have been a lot of times where early on in my career, I would overgive in my DMs in the hopes that they would sign up for my program.
Yes.
And then would feel resentful that I've just given you free coaching in my DMs and you're not going to reciprocate. And there was definitely like an imbalance in that. And so it's not up to the person in the DMs to hold that boundary. It's up to me to shore up my own boundaries and let them know what's okay and what's not okay, what's available and what's not available. And I can give up to this amount. And then beyond that, there's a fee for my service, or there's an investment that has to be reciprocated. Because to me, when I'm giving of my experiences and my wisdom, I'm making an investment in that other person's healing.
Absolutely.
And on their journey.
Yep.
And so if I'm going to make an energetic investment in that through presence and through wisdom and an experience, then there needs to be some sort of reciprocity in that process.
Wow.
And sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just nodding my head like, wow, I've never thought of it this way. When you invest your time in giving people advice and sharing your wisdom, you are invested in their well-being. I know that I am, but I never actually voiced it this way. I just had a breakthrough, y'all.
I mean, I used to experience this all the time when I was in the medical field. It would be, you know, like folks would come in struggling with their health. And, you know, I would help support them in all the ways that I can. But then at a certain point, like, they have to feel just as invested in their health as I do. And so I think that I internalized that lesson coming from the medical industry of like, I can only give as much as the patient is also willing to invest in.
Very wise.
And that's carried over into coaching as well.
Wow. Okay, cool.
So
I just learned a really good lesson.
I think just on the practical level, what are some ways that you can hold a boundary? Let's say somebody comes in to your DMs and they're like, oh, I've been struggling with this thing. And, you know, I'd love to get your take on this. Like, how would you hold that boundary in that situation?
So I really would, from all my heart, share how I do resonate with whatever they shared through perhaps my own experience, or I would say, yes, I have seen clients that shared this, this difficulty with you. And I would love to take this conversation further in a more formal setting. Here is my link to apply to be in my one-on-one coaching program. But that took a while for me to get to before I was like, okay, let's just do this. That's in the very beginning. But I had to heal a lot of people-pleasing tendencies, which is obviously a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
And I had a feeling this this podcast episode might go towards the nervous system a little bit.
Mm-hmm. As it always does.
As it always does. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I would add to that just what my own process has been as well, which is, I think the reflection back of like, I see you, I hear you, I understand you is a really big, important piece of it. And if it's a general enough question, I will ask them, do you feel comfortable with me answering this publicly? Because this seems a question that has come up multiple times. And so then I'll do a little mini story about it. I'll do a mini workshop on Instagram about it without giving away any specifics of what this person was saying. But like, kind of like how we're doing here is like, here's the general theme. These are general questions that have come in. And, I think that can be really valuable for folks is just knowing that there's someone else out there that has the same question. Maybe you've also been sitting with, how do I differentiate between free versus paid content? And then just even having that resonance out there of like, there's other people who are struggling with this too. And then here is somebody who's giving their wisdom and their advice and their experience around this can be really healing. And if it starts to creep into, again, my own curiosity, because it's really hard for me to like not tug on some of these strings when they come in. And so as soon as my own curiosity starts going to, I wonder what happened in their childhood, I want to ask them, why they feel like they can't give up their resources, why they feel like they are withholding value, why they feel like they're giving too much value, as soon as those start to sort of creep into my own system, that's when I invite into a connection call.
I see.
And so that's just personally how I do things.
Yeah. I have had instances where I would... I had a little thing happening on Instagram called Ask Nadine, where I would take these questions and obviously with their consent, just group them with other like the same kind of vibe questions and answer them in a video. I have also had instances where somebody would ask me a question that's very personal to them, and it would be so like the question would be very new to me, that it would really stir my curiosity as a coach. And as I ask more questions, I would actually eventually ask them to a market research call where it's reciprocated, where I give them, personalized answers, but the energetic exchange is that they answer a bunch of my questions for my own growth as well. Well, not me, for the growth of my business and for the growth of my community. So,
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think that that's something that we teach in BAM, but I don't think is taught enough of, is like reaching out to your community and asking them to be a part of the conversation and really stepping into their shoes and asking them what their struggles are, what their problems are, what their challenges are. You can be really skilled at speaking your potential client's language. And that's really helpful when it comes to marketing, because when people feel like, oh, like you're inside my head right now, that's how deeply you understand me, then that's a really, really strong and fertile place to start nourishing that trust in that relationship.
Yeah.
So the second question is about perhaps giving too much value away, and how do I shore it up? Or, why do I feel like I'm giving too much value away? So the question is, if I tell them the process and the outcome, I'll give away the whole workshop. And I have to give a little bit of context with this question. So this is somebody who is asking specifically about how to write a sales page for their offering. And in my answering of the question, I shared that Natalie Ross and I teach a workshop about conscious marketing, and her process and her method, which she calls the POP method, is based on let's outline the problem, let's outline the outcome, and let's outline the process. So those are the three like important factors that you want to see illustrated in a sales page. And so this person was saying, yeah, I'm cool with, talking about the problem, but if I give away the process and the outcome, I'm just going to give the whole workshop away. And so let's chat about this idea of like, I need to withhold because maybe this person's already at the place of like resentment and like I've given too much away.
Okay. So my mind is going towards giving a real life example.
Okay.
So when I write my sales page for my money coaching program, I will tell them what the process is because I want to see that they are down to do the things that are outlined in the process. So for me, it's about clarity, but that's not where I'm going. The first step is like, are you down to heal your money wounds through doing inner child work? Are you down to delving or going down that road? Because if you're not, then I'm not the one for you. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that the way I do inner child work is very different to how somebody else might do inner child work. Mm-hmm. It is informed through my experience, my trauma, my view on the world. So by saying what the process is, I'm not revealing at all the nitty gritty details of how I do it. The other thing is that it is a dance between you and the client. So even if you talk about what the process is, it will look very different because of the chemistry between yourself and the person receiving your coaching.
Yeah.
So it will not look the same. Mm-hmm. That is from my experience.
Yeah.
What about you?
Absolutely. I think I just want to highlight before we move on to like what I think, because you said some really important pieces there. When you talk about process, what you are doing is you are asking the potential client, are we a good fit?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because you're right. Like not everyone is down. Like, let's use your example of money coaching. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people want the process to be, give me a budget. They want that process. Yeah, that's totally fine. Sometimes they want the process to be, I need help figuring out what my taxes are.
Yeah, and you don't need inner child work for that. Maybe you do. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. You could.
Yeah, but the fact that you're upfront about, hey, we're going to get into some shadowy shit. Hey, we're going to get into some inner child stuff. Yeah, they aren't going to get into a process with you and then be taken aback by you asking about their shadows and you asking about their inner child and you asking about their family history and getting into some of that like nitty gritty stuff.
Yeah.
So part of talking about process is really about like, are we a good fit? And it's okay if we're not. It's okay if you need to go get a budget. I'm just not the person who's going to provide that for you.
Exactly. So the process is really telling them how you're going to do the thing. It doesn't necessarily, it doesn't coach them to do the thing. They can't take that process and go to another coach. They can, but it will have a completely different energy.
Yeah. Yeah. I also think a big part of that process is your presence as a practitioner.
Yeah.
Right. And so just because you're talking about, hey, we're going to do inner child stuff on your sales page doesn't mean that you're actually coaching someone through their inner child work on your sales page. You know, that comes in that synergistic dynamic, that relationship that you were talking about, where you're co-creating this space for safety and healing with your client. And that's where that process work comes alive. It's not, the process work doesn't come alive on the sales page.
It's just a very normal fear that if this is something that you're struggling with or you're facing that question of like, do I do this or how do I differentiate? It's a normal fear. Mm-hmm. It is a little bit, I would say there is a small scarcity wound there as well.
Mm.
of like, how much should I give? Or if I give too much, will people steal it? Or, just a little bit of pointing you towards that direction as well. Like, there's just thinking, where is the scarcity coming from? What's the conditioning? What's the narrative?
Yeah. Yeah. I also think that with the process, at least for me personally, I don't like to get super specific. Just because, how do I say this? So when I write sales pages, which is, I think of that as being like an art form in and of itself. It's one of the hardest pieces of copy that you'll write as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times your program is so like, it's like your baby, right?
Yeah,
so like,
definitely.
how do you write a biography about your baby? It's like, it's so nuanced, and there's so much like love and care and like so much that you put into this baby. And then you're just supposed to write like a 1-page sort of introduction of your baby. Like, that's really hard to do. But I always like to start out with point A, which is the problem when you use Natalie Ross's sort of methodology. And in the point A, using the language of the client as much as possible, because they need to hear their voice in the sales, right?
Yeah.
They need to be like, oh, Kat really understands my struggles as a spiritual entrepreneur. And so, you mentioned market research calls earlier. So I'd have pages and pages and pages of notes of market research calls. And sometimes they're not even market research calls so much as like, I had coffee with a friend the other week, and, she and I were just jamming about her business. And as she was talking about her business, I was like, oh, I've heard this before with my clients. And so I took a moment after our coffee date to just write down some of the things that she was saying, as I remembered how she said it,
Yeah.
And so when you start from that place, you immediately like that connection is right there.
Yeah.
And
when
then
the person reading feels understood, that is the most important thing.
That's huge, right? And then the outcome can be a little bit more in your voice. I think of the outcome as being like who this person wants to be once they have, resolved these struggles around money or these struggles around approaching their business as a spiritual practice. And so that's where you can sort of sprinkle in your words a bit. But I think that process is the hardest one for people.
Yeah.
Because you can get really jargony, you can get really like in your own vocabulary about like, like in our language, in our community, like sympathetic and parasympathetic, like who knows what that means, right? And so like making sure that as you are writing about the process, that you are speaking in a way that someone who's reading the sales page doesn't need a dictionary or like have like another browser opened up to Wikipedia on their
otherwise you'll lose them, they'll check out.
Exactly. And when it comes to offers too, I like to leave a little bit of leniency in the process part.
Yeah.
I have sort of a journey that I want to take my clients on, but along that journey, like there's going to be some inner child work, there's going to be some somatic integration, there's going to be some nervous system education, all of these things that leads to the outcome, but being specific enough that you're calling in the right people. So like if you're not a nervous system nerd, probably not the right space for you with BAM, because we spend so much time talking about the nervous system and you're going to check out. And so I like being really upfront about those things, because I want the folks who sign up for my offer, and for anyone who's listening for your offer, right? Like, you want those people to be like a full and complete fuck yes.
Yeah. Yeah. If I may add something here, is that sometimes the language or the words that you use in your process can also be used as a filter, or as Kat would put it, as a bouncer. So if, for example, you only want to attract people that know or have like previous knowledge of the nervous system, for example, do use words like sympathetic and parasympathetic.
Yes.
Because that is a way that you can filter out people that are into this or have done work before. For example, for me, with money stuff, like I would use a little bit of jargon just to know that I want to attract people that have used the budget but fell off the budget because of their childhood issues or childhood trauma around resources. So I don't want to attract people that are coming to me to begin their money journey. That's not where I want my people at. So
Yeah.
the lingo I use is specifically targeted at those people and not those people.
Perfect. I actually think that that leads into our third question really beautifully.
Magic.
So the third question is, if I get specific about who I'm speaking to and what they're struggling with, I will lose people.
Yeah, that is a very big one. Niching down is scary as fuck, y'all, but it's so refreshing once you're in it. Gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is one of your big things that we did when you went through BAM.
Oh my goodness.
Before I asked you to come on and co-coach with me, this was a massive block for you.
Yeah.
So I am curious, what did it feel like before you niched down? And what does it feel like now?
So, okay, let me tell you about what was going on in my mind. Before, I was like, I have this medicine, and this medicine is going to be so transformational for all these people. So I wanted to save the world, right? What I was doing was that I was not only just exhausting myself as a single person entrepreneur business, it was a lot, but I was also being too generic with my messaging. When you're too generic, you pretty much speak to no one. So I decided who I really want to speak to. Because yes, my message and my medicine are potent for people in many different stages of their money journey, for example. However, the people that light me up the most are the people that I decided to niche down to. So right now, I feel like I'm getting more people that I feel really turned on by helping. And the people that I no longer serve, I am creating a digital community for them, or a digital library where that through that content, without me being in the middle or using up any of my resources on a daily basis, they go through to go to the next level where I can come in and help them along, or hold their hand, or Sherpa them along the journey.
Yeah.
So I pretty much honed into where do they need hand-holding and where can they do it on their own.
Yeah.
So before I come in, they can do it on their own. I can take them up to a certain point, and then if they need help, I'm here.
Yeah.
So this has given me a lot more energy for myself. It has made me more specific, and it really, really, really makes me more and more excited and lit up to do stuff rather than before, when I was like, I don't even know who I'm talking to. I want to talk to everyone.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. And I think that we can sort of use this example in real time as, sort of answering the previous question, which is about problem, process, outcome. right? So what Nadine, and I'm just going to use you as like a bit of like a market research piece, is what Nadine has shown us in this is the before and the after.
Yeah.
So in the before, if we can highlight, it felt really scary to niche down because you felt like you needed to save the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
You felt like your resources were maybe extended because there's so much to do when you're trying to save the world. And in that process of being everything for everyone who struggles with any kind of money problem, your messaging is really confusing because you're not sure. Yeah, you're not sure at what point, people are supposed to start working with you. And so from that confusion, there's a lack of clarity to your audience because, there's not a clarity around who you're even calling in.
Well, also, I was confused. Because I can help with this. I can help with this. I can help with this. I'm like, I know I can. And I know there's a question in the list of questions about like, how do I just hone into one of my like zone of genius? I know I can, but where do I want to help? Because this is my time too.
Right. Mm-hmm. And then the outcome of that is, on this side of it, you feel like every single client that's on your roster lights you up. You feel like you have more energy to do and spend more time on your business in ways that are efficient and aligned. You also have more time to be a human being outside of your business. And you've created systems to usher people into your work and also give them the tools to start their money journey wherever they are.
Yeah,
right?
Not necessarily with me physically being there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so like we can see, like if this was a sales page, we've got problem and we've got outcome that we've just sort of outlined here. And then if we were talking about this in terms of process, then we can talk about how we bridge the gap between those two things, right? And sort of in BAM, the process is really understanding where your blocks and challenges are around why do you feel like you need to save the world?
I was about to say, like, my need to save the world came from a lot of wounding that happened during childhood. Surprise.
Yeah, exactly. So we need to integrate those pieces so that you feel safe to say, actually, yes, this is what I want, and no, this is what I don't want.
Yeah, because it's so easy to...
Go ahead.
It's just easy to say, okay, so I'm going to stop doing that. But is it that easy?
Yeah.
Is it that easy to just stop doing something?
Yeah.
Generally, when you can't stop doing something, there's trauma.
Right. And a big piece of that is, going back to what you said earlier of like saying yes to the people who light you up, and what is blocking you from saying yes. And, just because you are good at doing a thing, like I'm sure you're excellent at coming up with budgets for people, does not obligate you to provide that as a service to your community. I remember when I switched over from doing acupuncture to coaching, I got a couple of emails from previous clients who weren't even my patients anymore, who were like, oh, but you're so good with your hands. Like you need to do something with your hands and you need to keep building on that gift that you have with your needles. And with that came this like feeling of like, yeah, just because I'm good at the thing doesn't mean that's the thing that lights me up and that's the thing I want to do.
Yeah.
And so you are allowed to say no, just based on that very basis, that singular basis. Somehow this turned into a conversation about boundaries, this whole talk.
Surprise.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's part of the process is like, okay, we're going to do a little bit of inner child work so that we can understand where these patterns are coming from. And then from that inner child work, we're going to give you some structure on how to actually align with who you want to call in.
Yeah.
And then we're going to talk about, okay, so now that you know who you want to call in, let's go out there and do a bit of market research. And I'm going to give you the structure on how to do that. And then from there, that's where we can build in copy. And so it becomes this really like logical step-by-step process that we can lead you through. And that's replicable to really anybody who's struggling with this. And so that's how you bridge the gap. And so we've basically just like written a sales page, just using this whole process, right?
Yep.
And do you see how specific, I'm speaking to the listener here, like, do you see how specific we had to get
Very
for
specific,
it to feel
yeah.
in alignment, right?
Yeah. Very, very
Because again,
specific.
you know, somebody who wants to niche down may not be ready for looking at their inner child stuff, looking at their nervous system, going and doing market research calls, right? But the kind of person who I want to work with is going to be like a fuck yes to all of those things.
Yeah.
You know, if not a fuck yes, then it's like, ooh, that feels really scary. And I can see that there's a purpose to this.
There is something I'd like to address here from a money perspective, which is a lot of people might think, how am I going to make good money or create a living or whatever it is, just from the handful of people that I'm niching down to? Wouldn't it be smarter if I'm broader, meaning I'll bring in more clients? The answer is honestly no. The more specific you are, the more you call in these fuck yes clients, as Kat put it. These fuck yes clients are really down to work with you because of how deeply you understand them. You use their own lingo. You have also probably walked in the path that they're trying to walk in on their own. Therefore, they will be ready and prepared and willing and very happy to invest in themselves just to stay or just to like leave that place of discomfort quicker than they would on their own, because they know that you are specific. You're a specialized person in that particular wound or in that particular struggle. Like, how much more would you pay a skin specialist than a GP? Just because you know that within a few sessions, they will help you with whatever issue you have with your skin, as opposed to like going 12 times to the GP and he's just like skipping around. You see what I mean?
Yeah. And so when you hone that specific skill set and you're able to speak to a specific person, there's a energetic and financial investment that people are more willing to make than if you are a generalist.
Yeah.
And I would say that was true for me as an acupuncturist. Is I started out my career as a general acupuncture, basically taking in any kind of person who struggled with anything from insomnia to sports medicine to reproductive health to, basically anything. And as I went deeper and deeper into my career and got really specific into fertility and the language and the understanding and the hormones and the like it's a whole field into itself, right? Imagine walking into a clinic where you know more about, just taking this example, like you know more about your IVF cycle than, your medical professional. Like that can't feel good. Right?
No. Yeah.
And so, folks were willing and happy to, pay the investment because they felt like I was right there in the process with them and I understood on a knowledge and wisdom and experience level. And that's really what you're doing as you're niching is you are getting really specific about who you're serving and not just saying like, this is who I want to serve, but like you have the ability to back that up.
Yeah, exactly.
That has substance behind it.
I really like this generalist versus specialist, example that we've come towards, when people ask about niching down, just think about yourself as a specialist versus a generalist.
Yeah. And so I think part of that fear of, if I get specific of who I'm speaking to and what they're struggling with, I'm going to lose people, is folks who don't know exactly who they want to serve, which is kind of where you were at when we first met through your cycle of BAM. And also combined with this like idea of like, I can save the world.
Yeah.
You know? And when you sit with that feeling, I'm talking to the listeners, is like, if you sit with that feeling of like, what would happen if you allowed your communication, your marketing, your content to not just be like, I'm drawing people in, but, you know, my words are also being the bouncer who is preemptively saying no to the people who I don't actually want to work with. And yes, that pool might be a little bit smaller, but you are getting the kind of clients that feel like a fuck yes to you. And so I would just sort of invite that somatic experience in of like, you know, it's okay. It's okay if you lose people. Okay, so we have one more question, which is, how do I hone my services if I have so many things I can offer my clients? This is a good one. This is one that I feel like you've been playing with.
Yeah. Well, what I'm going to share is specifically for me because I have a lot of interests, and I know that I can talk about a lot of things, and a lot of things light me up at different times. So the way I decided to kind of play with this is creating digital courses. So my one-on-one work will look very different to the digital courses that I put out there that will be kind of, but not really related to what I'm doing in one-on-one stuff, but also within the same interest and, you know, just the same energetic vibe kind of thing. Sure. But that just makes me excited. That kind of lights me up when I know that I don't need to do one thing only. The other thing is that honoring that not every idea that comes to my brilliant brain is something that I have to action. It could be a great idea. I could write it down and maybe one day I could take it to fruition. But right now I think it and that's it. I just let it go. Yeah. Yeah. So I hope that helps.
I think that this question is like, for any Manny Gens out there.
I was going
to say. You're sitting with two manifesting generators, and so I think this is something that we both have struggled with. Yeah. And so the first filter that I would say is, as a manifesting generator, I'm very similar to you in like, I want to talk about all of these things and I want to do everything, and I see the interconnectedness of all these different ways that the world works. And so like there's times where I'm like, how do I like, there's just so much I want to say. And so I think the first layer of filtration for me is, does offering this service light me up? You know, yes, again, it sort of goes back to the previous question of like, yes, I can do that. But do I personally, do I want to do that? Do I have a desire to put energy into this? And if the answer is no, like that's a fair no. And so I have to listen to that in my body. Yeah. I used to say yes when I meant no. But I think that that's the first layer. The second layer is, I think, this is me speaking specifically as a manifesting generator, like there's a lot of energy in this body of mine. And I have, you know, the capacity to do a lot more things than, let's say, a projector or a reflector. But the struggle with being a manifesting generator is being able to prune. And so the way that I like to think of it is I'm an apple tree and I can have 50 branches with kind of shitty apples, right? Or I can have 5 branches with really, really juicy, delicious apples.
Yum.
And so my process is really about how do you prune back so that we have less apples, but it's more delicious.
I see. Okay.
And, you know, I'm not saying that one way is better than the other. We, you know, we have our own struggles as these different types. And I think the struggle of the, like, I have too many services is, I would say, not specific to the manifesting generator, but like we struggle with it a little bit more. And, you know, how do we hone this down? And so if you can think of yourself as a tree and what can you intentionally prune through asking, what do I actually want to and love to and like feel lit up by doing? And, you know, do I have too many apples on my branches and do I need to prune a branch?
Yeah.
And those are all fair questions.
Something that I have come across recently that has helped me immensely with my manifesting generator tendencies is a book I read by accident. Actually, I was going to donate it and I thought I might as well read it. It's called Start With Why by Simon Sinek. And it's perfect because it kind of teaches you how to be very specific with your why. Okay, so like it's like my personal mission statement. And I'm a big values nerd. So one of the things that I really love helping people do is understanding what their values are. So I took that a step forward by saying, okay, so this is my why. If my values are the railroad tracks, then my whats are my one-on-one coaching, working in BAM, like my future podcast, like all the whats that are rooted in my how, in my values and my why. So when my manifesting generator mind comes online and goes, oh my God, let's write a course about money and chakras. I'll be like, okay, let's take it through the filter. And if it aligns, I'll be like, cool, that's something to consider in the future. I don't have energy for it yet. But if it doesn't align through the filter, I'll be like, great idea. Not for me.
Yeah.
That's been so good for my energy levels.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, I read that one a long time ago. That's a good one to pick up again as we're going into the metal season, because I think metal autumn energy is like very much aligned with asking why. Like this is where we do that pruning, right? Like, and in literal farm terms, this is actually when we prune fruit trees, is when we get to see all the branches. And all the leaves have fallen off and we can actually like see the structure of the tree. And so we get to like actually go in and be like, okay, so this branch is really structurally integral and this branch is not. So let's cut that one.
Pretty much. So that was such a good filter for me, because I do have that, oh my God, I could do everything energy sometimes, you know? So.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, I just want to wrap up this conversation and say thank you so much for being here, Nadine. I have,
of course,
absolutely loved having you as a co-coach in BAM, and I think that
me too.
You know, all this work that you've done personally and professionally, it translates so beautifully, because who doesn't, as an entrepreneur, have some sort of money block? And you came to me as money and life purpose coach, and so it just felt like the perfect alignment to bring you on as a team member. So thank you so much for being here for the podcast and also being here for the BAM members.
Of course, it's an honor and a pleasure to hold space for all our BAMers, our BAM family.
So we have a couple of invitations. The first one is, I'd love to do more podcast episodes like this with you, Nadine. So if you have any questions out there, shoot me an email, kat@empoweredcuriosity.com, and we'll collect them. And if we see themes, kind of like how I saw a theme coming up, if we see themes, then we'll collect them all and do another Q&A type of a question and answer podcast episode. And then we have our next round of BAM opening up in January. So I haven't put out any sort of promotional things. And so if you're listening to this podcast, this is the first time we're really talking about it. And so the way to really, really stay in touch with that is to get on my mailing list. So I'm going to be sending out all the information probably starting in November, December. But if you're curious about joining BAM, just shoot on over to my website, empoweredcuriosity.com, sign up for the waiting list. And I still have the old sales page for this last round up, so you can get a peek into what we're all about. We're going to revamp that for the next launch. But yeah, we're so excited to be able to offer BAM again in January, and we hope that we get to see you there.
Yeah, that sounds very exciting. January is always a good time to embark on a new journey and, dive into things and just opening up a new world for yourself through your business. Gosh, it's been the most wonderful thing I did for myself last year, joining BAM.
Well, I'm super glad that you're in it and now you're part of the team. So
yes.
Well, wonderful. And we'll talk to y'all later.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.